The origin of the bloody conflict happening in Gaza and Israel is complicated given the long, disputed history of the region, according to experts who have spent decades studying the region. As the attacks continue in both countries, the experts fear that any attempts at truly achieving peace between the Palestinians and Israelis may have been pushed back heavily. The war, known in Israel as the Six-Day War, ended with Israel gaining control of several territories, including the Gaza Strip, and that has led to the violence and political fallout that has befallen the area currently. Heschel, the school's Eli.M. Following its battles with Egypt, Lebanon, Syria and Jordan, Israel touted its swift victory and new territory, which included lands with long historical significance to Israeli Jews. At the same time, Israel had to deal with an influx of Arabs who now lived under its control, and the retaliation from the neighboring countries who still disputed Israel's claims over the land. The question is, was that victory in fact in some way not a victory? Because the consequence of it was an enormous headache for Israel. Israel has been the target of several military excursions by the nations in that war, particularly Egypt, to try and regain some of that land, including during the 1973 Arab-Israeli War, known in Israel as the Yom Kippur War. Egypt would eventually regain the Sinai Peninsula in 1982, following an agreement it signed with Israel 3 years prior. Gaza, however, remained under Israeli control and tensions continued to flare between Palestinians and Israelis who had begun constructing settlements in the region. The tensions came to a turning point in 1987 during the First Intifada, or uprising, when Palestinians started to violently rebel against Israeli forces and civilians. It was during this time that Hamas emerged and began to stage violent strikes against Israeli forces. By the time the Intifada ended in the early 90s, over 1,000 people had been killed, and Gaza was left in ruin from the fighting. Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization would eventually agree to the Oslo Accords in 1993, which granted Palestinians the right to self-government. Palestinian Authority, which governed Gaza and continues to govern the West Bank, did try to crack down on terrorism alongside the Israeli government, but it was not always successful, and groups like Hamas continued to incite and inflict violence on Israel. In 2000, a second intifada began, and hundreds more were hurt and killed in the violent protests. 5 years later, the Israeli government voted to withdraw from Gaza, and then Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon expelled 9,480 Jewish settlers from 21 settlements from the region. That withdrawal of the Jewish settlements left some Israeli Jews with the resentment that inflames them to this day. A 2006 election where Hamas became Gaza's leading party has led to increased violence, and a decline in economic resources for its people, as Israel and other nations cut off support. Israel and Egypt imposed a blockade on the coastal strip, which continues to this day.